I work at a tourist information center in Vienna, Austria. Last month, an American couple walked in and asked for directions to Mozart's birthplace. I told them Mozart was born in Salzburg, about 3 hours away. The husband pulled out his phone and said that couldn't be right because his travel app clearly showed Vienna was the capital of classical music, which meant all composers were born here. I explained that yes, Vienna is famous for classical music, but composers came from many cities. He showed me a Wikipedia article about Vienna being the music capital and said, "Look, it says right here Mozart performed in Vienna. So obviously he was born here." His wife added that they'd paid for a Vienna tour package specifically to see Mozart's birthplace, so the tour company wouldn't lie about that. When I suggested they'd maybe confused it with Mozart's residence in Vienna, which they could visit, the husband asked if I was saying Americans don't know how to read travel guides. He wanted to speak to my supervisor about my incorrect information. I was the supervisor. They left to find Mozart's birthplace in Vienna on their own. This is the level of cultural confusion I document every week. Not random rants, but real patterns in how people misunderstand the world. If you value that kind of depth over noise, you'll want to stay connected here. I had another American ask me where the Berlin Wall was in Vienna. When I said the Berlin Wall was in Berlin, Germany, she insisted I was wrong because her college history professor said the wall divided Eastern and Western Europe, and Austria was between those, so the wall had to run through Vienna. She had a study guide to prove it. A man from Texas once demanded to know why our Austrian flag looked exactly like the Latvian flag, just upside down. I explained they're different designs entirely. He said he'd been to Latvia last week and was pretty sure we stole their flag. He took a photo of our flag to report it when he got home, and that was just Tuesday. I was working the front desk at a hotel in Brussels, Belgium, when an American businessman checked in and asked what time zone we used. I told him Central European time. He looked confused and said that couldn't be right because Europe wasn't in Central Time, America was. I explained that each continent has its own time zones, and Central European Time is what we call it here. He insisted I meant Central Standard Time like Chicago, because Central means middle of the country, and Belgium was in the middle of Europe. I showed him a world clock with different zones. He studied it for a minute and then declared it was wrong because it showed New York and London weren't in the same time zone. But his phone calls with his London office always worked during business hours. When I explained they probably accommodated the 5-hour difference, he said that proved my clock was broken because 5 hours would make it dark in one city and light in another at the same time. He asked if we had an American clock he could use instead. I told him his phone would automatically adjust. He said he didn't trust automatic settings because they were controlled by the government. The next week, I met an American woman at a cafe in Amsterdam who wanted to know why Dutch people spoke German. I said, "We speak Dutch." She said, "Dutch? German, same thing. It's all one language." I explained they're completely different languages. She told me her aunt was German and spoke exactly like the people here, so I was wrong. When I said perhaps her aunt was actually Dutch, she pulled up a family tree showing her aunt was born in Munich. I agreed that's in Germany. She said, "Exactly. So why do you speak German in Amsterdam?" I explained Amsterdam is in the Netherlands, not Germany, and we speak Dutch, which is a separate language. She asked why we didn't just admit it was German with an accent. I suggested she try speaking to someone in Germany and someone here to hear the difference. She said she already had, and they sounded identical. She ordered her coffee in what she called German. It was definitely English with random German words mixed in. Most people just laugh at moments like this. I study what they reveal about how confidence beats competence in everyday life. That's the pattern I decode here every week. Subscribe if you like seeing how deep the misunderstanding actually goes. The waiter responded in perfect English. She turned to me and said, "See? He speaks German." I was giving a walking tour in Copenhagen when an American asked why Denmark was so obsessed with Sweden. I asked what he meant. He said everywhere he looked, he saw Swedish flags, Swedish meatballs at restaurants, and Swedish design stores. I explained those were Danish flags, Danish meatballs, and Danish design. He insisted the flag was definitely Swedish because it had a cross and was blue and yellow. I showed him a Danish flag, which is red with a white cross. He said that was probably the Danish Navy flag or something, but the real flag was blue and yellow like at IKEA. I told him IKEA was Swedish, not Danish. He said IKEA was in Copenhagen, therefore it was Danish. When I explained IKEA is a Swedish company with stores worldwide, he asked why Sweden would open stores in their own country. I said Copenhagen is in Denmark, not Sweden. He checked his map app and said Copenhagen was definitely in Scandinavia, which was in Sweden. His wife added they'd specifically picked Sweden for their Nordic trip, and Copenhagen was their first stop. They'd been here 3 days. I work as a flight attendant on European routes. Last month, an American passenger asked me if we'd be landing in England soon. I told him we were flying to Scotland, specifically Edinburgh. He said Edinburgh was in England, so same thing. I explained Scotland and England are different countries within the United Kingdom. He laughed and said he knew that, but England was the main one. So people just called it all England, like how people say America, but mean the United States. I said Scottish people definitely don't call Scotland England. He said they probably did when talking to Americans to make it easier. When we landed in Edinburgh, he asked me where the gate to London was. I told him London was a different city, about an hour flight away. He pulled up his booking confirmation, which clearly said Edinburgh, and insisted his travel agent said he was flying to England. I explained his ticket was correct for Edinburgh, Scotland. He asked to speak to the captain about the confusion. The captain was Scottish. He told the passenger, "Welcome to Scotland, not England." The passenger asked if that was a legal distinction or just a local preference. I was working at a train station ticket counter in Prague, Czech Republic, when an American couple wanted 2 tickets to Czechoslovakia. I told them Czechoslovakia didn't exist anymore. It split into Czech Republic and Slovakia in 1993. The husband said his father fought in World War II, and it was definitely called Czechoslovakia. I agreed it was, but that was over 30 years ago. He insisted countries don't just change names like that. I explained the country peacefully split into 2 separate nations. His wife said that sounded made up because she'd never heard about it on the news. When I showed them a map with both countries labeled separately, the husband said the map must be outdated because he had an atlas from 2005 at home that showed Czechoslovakia. I told him he should check that atlas again. He asked if this was some kind of tourist scam to charge them for 2 countries instead of 1. I explained they were currently in Prague, which is in the Czech Republic, and if they wanted to go to Slovakia, that was a different country, requiring a different ticket. They bought 1 ticket to wherever we are now and left, muttering about European bureaucracy. I was behind the counter at a pharmacy in Dublin, Ireland, when an American tourist asked if we accepted British pounds. I said no, we use euros because Ireland is in the European Union. He said Ireland was part of the British Isles, so they had to use British money. I explained the British Isles is a geographic term, not a political one, and the Republic of Ireland is an independent country. He told me he'd learned in school that Ireland was owned by Britain. I said Northern Ireland is part of the UK, but the Republic of Ireland has been independent since 1922. He asked when that happened. I repeated 1922. He said that seemed recent and probably wasn't finalized yet. When I assured him it was definitely finalized over a century ago, he asked why we still spoke English if we weren't British. I explained many countries speak English without being part of Britain. He said that proved we were basically British, so pounds should work. I told him the ATM outside dispensed euros. He said he'd just use his dollars and we could figure out the conversion. I said we only accepted euros, no exceptions. He paid with a credit card and asked if the charge would show up in real money. My favorite story happened when I was working as a tour guide in Sydney, Australia. An American family joined my harbor tour, and within 5 minutes the father asked what part of Europe we were in. I said we were in Australia, not Europe. He insisted Australia was near Austria, which was in Europe, so we had to be in Europe too. I explained Australia is a country and continent in the southern hemisphere, while Austria is a landlocked country in Central Europe. He said the names were too similar for that to be a coincidence, so they must be connected. I showed him a world map. He studied it and said the map was wrong because Australia looked too big to be near Austria. When I explained they're on opposite sides of the world, he asked why they had such similar names then. I said it was just a coincidence in English. He told me his daughter was studying geography in 10th grade, and she'd never mentioned 2 different places. His daughter, standing right there, said, "Dad, I literally did a project on Australia last semester." He said he remembered that project about kangaroos in the Alps. She said kangaroos are in Australia, not Austria. He turned to me and asked if this was a common mix-up. I told him most people understood the difference by the time they booked flights. He said in his defense, both countries started with AUSTR and had 8 letters. When I pointed out Australia has 9 letters, he counted them on his fingers twice, and then asked if we spelled it differently in Australia. His wife finally said, "Honey, we flew for 20 hours. Remember? That British guy wouldn't fly to Europe." The British guy was our pilot, who was Australian. They spent the rest of the tour asking if various landmarks were also in Austria. Look, I get it. Geography isn't everyone's strength, but the confidence is what gets me every time. That mix of misplaced confidence and cultural blindness? It's not rare, it's a pattern. I track it across travel, politics, and media so you don't have to. Subscribing doesn't help me. It helps you not miss the next time the world accidentally exposes itself like this. And somewhere right now, another American is explaining to a confused Swiss person why Switzerland and Sweden are obviously the same country, because they both start with W, Samatoiders.